Hey, welcome back! Good to have you here! Tonight, we've got 3 short stories about how power works in the background. We'll start with Cleopatra and the way she used language, alliances and public image to keep Egypt active in the politics of her time. Then we'll look at AI hallucinations, why these systems sometimes sound confident while producing incorrect information, and a few simple habits that make their answers more reliable. And we'll wrap up with tipping in the US and how a set of suggested percentages on a screen has become part of the actual income structure in service work. Let's dive in! For many of us, Cleopatra first appears as the ultimate icon: striking beauty, perfect eyeliner, dramatic legends about milk baths. If you look at historical sources, another layer appears: a monarch trying to protect her country and keep a seat at the table in Roman politics. One of her key tools was language. Ancient writers mention that while many members of her dynasty focused on Greek, Cleopatra could speak to different groups in several languages, including Egyptian. Being able to switch languages in the same meeting meant she could adjust tone and message to each audience and keep control of the conversation. She also paid close attention to visual image. On her coins, Cleopatra appears with a clear profile and chosen symbols of authority. For people who use those coins every day, that small piece of metal worked like a tiny billboard. It reminded them who represented Egypt and which alliances were in play. Her well-known relationships were part of this political picture. The alliance with Julius Caesar helped secure her position on the throne and kept Egypt from being turned into just another province. Later, public appearances with Mark Antony, shared ceremonies on the Nile, banquets and carefully staged entries signaled to allies and rivals that there was a strong Eastern partner, not a distant client state. After her defeat, it was Roman authors who shaped much of the story that survived. They had strong reasons to highlight emotion and scandal and to minimize her political skills. Presenting Cleopatra as dangerously captivating made the new Roman leadership look stronger and more justified. That framing traveled through centuries and influenced how later cultures imagined her. When you put these pieces together, Cleopatra looks like a leader who used language, symbols and public ritual as part of her strategy. Armies and taxes were one side of power, speeches, coins and processions were another. If this way of looking at history resonates with you, Nibble has more bite-sized lessons that break things down just as clearly. We've just talked about a queen who shaped reality on purpose. Now let's talk about machines that can twist it by accident. When people say AI hallucinates, they mean it confidently invents answers that sound right but aren't. Here's the key thing. Chatbots like the ones from OpenAI, Google or Microsoft are trained to predict the next words that fits the pattern. They've read a lot of internet text and books and learned how language usually flows. When you ask a question, they generate something that looks like the kinds of answers they've seen, but they don't have a built-in truth detector. Most of the time, that's fine. Ask for a recipe, a workout idea or a rough explanation of photosynthesis, and patterns are enough. Problems start when your question is very specific or niche, the model didn't see enough real data on it, or you push it to give a firm answer even when it's not sure. Then it does what it was trained to do. Fill in the blanks with the most plausible sequence of words. That might mean inventing a scientific paper that doesn't exist, giving a made-up court case, or confidently guessing a wrong date. It isn't lying in the human sense, it's doing its best impression of an answer instead of saying, "I don't know." So, what can you do as a user? A few simple habits can make the answers much more reliable. Ask for sources and check them. Say, "Give me links" or "Cite where this comes from." Then actually click. If the links don't match the claim or look shady, you've got a hallucination. Tell it how to behave. add instructions like, if you're not sure, say you don't know, or only answer if you can find a reliable source, otherwise say you can't. Modern modals are surprisingly good at following that when you are explicit. Keep the question narrow. Explain Cleopatra in 5 bullet points is safer than compare Cleopatra and every modern female leader. The broader you go, the more the modal has to generalize and fill in gaps instead of staying close to specific checkable facts. Feed it the source yourself. Paste in the article, contract, or research summary and say, answer only using this text, or quote the parts you're using. Then it doesn't have to guess, it works with what you gave it. Use it as a first draft, not a final verdict. Let it outline, rephrase, or brainstorm. For legal, medical, financial, or historical details that really matter, treat it like a clever intern. Great for drafting, never for signing things or making final decisions alone. Behind the scenes, companies are trying to reduce hallucinations with tools that fetch live data, add verification layers, and make modals say, I'm not confident, more often. But the safest combo is still human plus AI working together, not one replacing the other. Now, from royal drama and AI drama to everyday drama. The number you have to pick on a tipping screen. For many visitors, the US tipping system feels insane. For many workers, it's the difference between paying rent and not. Quick history. When the federal minimum wage was introduced in the 1930s, many service jobs were put in a separate category instead of getting the full rate. Later laws allowed a special tipped minimum wage, meaning businesses could pay a lower hourly rate as long as tips were expected to fill the gap. That logic stayed. To this day, many states still have a separate tipped minimum wage that can be much lower than the standard one. In those places, restaurants legally pay servers a small base salary and arrange the job so that tips are meant to carry them the rest of the way. That's why your receipt often says gratuity not included, and why the tablet spins around with 18, 20, 25% buttons. It's not there by accident. A big chunk of staff income really does come from that line. In a full-service restaurant, people usually tip around 18 to 20% before tax, if everything went fine. More for amazing service, less only if something was truly bad and you try to resolve it. Rough rule of thumb people actually use: restaurant table service, 18 to 20% of the pre-tax bill. Bar, about $1–2 per drink, or 15 to 20% on a big tab. Taxi, 15 to 20% if the ride was okay or better. Coffee to go, completely optional. It's more like thanks than an obligation. Why might this feel a little intense now? Partly because payment tablets default to high percentages and full-screen prompts. Some delivery apps even try to guilt you into tipping before the job is done. On certain platforms, if you set your driver tip to $0, you get a warning like orders without a tip may be delivered later. When people understand how the tipping system is set up, that line on the check starts to look different. What seems like a simple "thank you for the service" is also a way of helping cover part of the paycheck that isn't included in base wages. Once people know this, many become more thoughtful about what they leave. Some pick a range that fits their budget and stick to it. Others try to tip a bit more regularly, simply because they see how their choice influences the day-to-day income of the staff. There's also the fine print. A service charge added by the restaurant isn't always the same as a tip that goes directly to staff. Some places pool it and share it with the team, others keep part of it. So the next time a tablet swings around asking for 20%, you'll know why it's there, who likely depends on it, and where you leave room to decide what feels right for you. Once you understand the system behind tipping in the US, those prompts feel less like a demand and more like context you can use to make your own choice. Tonight, We went from a queen who carefully built her public image to AI systems that can sound sure even when they're guessing, to the history behind that tipping screen at the end of a meal, and how those percentages became part of paying people who work in service. If this episode gave your curiosity even a tiny nudge, I'll count that as a win. Thanks for spending your time with Nibble. Here, every 10 minutes turn into knowledge.